today.
That's right. The English Premier League resumed after an international break this weekend. The amazing, or the most interesting thing is that at least 26 players of Nigerian descent or origin are part of that. About, I think it's about 5.2%, they said, of the total number of players in the Premier League. Now we want to ask, how did this situation come about? What are the implications for both Nigerian and indeed English soccer?
Absolutely.
And good news for Arsenal fans, like I said, for players of Nigerian descent in the Arsenal camp. We're going to be looking at these and other issues through a public affairs analyst, and that's Professor Felix Okokere of the Edo State University in Ekpoma. Prof, many thanks for coming on the show. Clearly, you are a football fan, I take that to mean.
Can you unmute?
Can you unmute yourself, Prof?
Yes.
Can you?
Just unmute your device.
Can you hear us now, Prof?
I think we may give him a little time to.
Yeah, we'll give him a little bit of time to sort himself out. Yeah, but maybe we can, hobnob over the issues ourselves until Prof gets sorted. Great if you're, a Nigerian, seeing what's happening in the Premier League, but there's also a little bit of cause for concern, because there's a school of thought that says, well, why don't we have these Nigerians in the national team? If we had Bukayo Saka and all these guys against South Africa last week, we probably would have beaten them 20-0,
Well, perhaps or perhaps not. It's not just about the players themselves, like I always go back to. It's also about the enabling environment, and I believe that the system doesn't just fix itself overnight, regardless. And it's also easy to jump on the successes of these Nigerians
Yes.
with British descent. But again, how do we harness the successes to become role models for those in Nigeria?
Okay, we learned that Prof is back. Prof, can you hear us?
Yes, very well, very clearly.
Okay, the first question, we want to know whether you're actually qualified for this discussion, Prof. Are you a soccer fan?
Yes, I played football, and I'm also a FIFA intermediary.
Ooh, okay. A lot more qualified than I thought. Okay, Prof, so what do you make of this large number of Nigerian players of Nigerian descent in the English Premiership? What does it portend for you generally?
Yeah, it's a very good development. Actually, let me take you through a little historical, lane. Since the EPL started in 1992, Nigeria has had a very good representation in the EPL, starting from Efan Ekoku, if you recall, who debuted for Norwich City in April 1993. We also had people like Shola Ameobi, who actually, up to now, holds the highest number of appearances in the EPL. So from that time, we've had a lot of people, like John Mikel Obi, Moses Simon, Victor Moses, and a whole lot of others. Now, before then, we had the Fashanu brothers, John and Justin. So it's been a long time coming. And even in your own I understand that you're an Arsenal fan.
No, I'm a Chelsea fan. Chelsea.
Oh,
Blues
okay,
for life,
I'm
brother.
sorry.
Blues.
I'm sorry, of Chelsea.
No Nigerian league fan here.
Yeah, your own Chelsea, you have, Mikel Obi, and all that. So, who actually won a lot of trophies, Victor Moses.
Absolutely.
And,
we also had Celestin Babayaro in those.
Absolutely. Who was actually a pioneer Nigerian player in Chelsea. So, you see, we've had, this thing coming a long time. So, Nigerians have been doing very well. The likes of, Olaino now, Taiwo and others.
Yes.
So, Nigeria has a plethora of talents around the world. But the EPL, the representation is quite large. So, I would say it's a good development and it's a good thing for Nigerian football.
All right, let me come back to Hassan Wada, who's joining us this morning. He's chairman
Of the Kogi
Kogi
State
State
Football
Football
Association.
Association. You're welcome to the show. So, I mean, you've listened to Prof. What's your stake on this?
Well, thank you for having me on the show. You know, the English Premier League is easily the most visible league around the world. So they tend to attract some of the best players around the world. To date, 63 Nigerians have played in the English Premier League, like Prof mentioned, starting with Efani Koko. Then you also look at our historical relationship with the British people via colonialism. We inherited their language, English, which is the lingua franca of Nigeria. So it's easier for Nigerians to assimilate based on cultural identity. Then you also note that prior to migration to America, Britain used to be the #1 destination for Nigerians. So a lot of Nigerian families migrated to the UK and they integrated themselves into the footballing culture. Then also, we will need to also look at our local prowess. In 1994, Nigeria launched itself at the world stage by performing beyond expectations at the 1994 World Cup. That elevated Nigeria to, I think, #6 or #7 in the world. Then in 1996, then came in the Atlanta 96 Dream Team, led by the likes of Kanu Nwankwo, JJ Okocha, Taribo West, Daniel Amokachi, Celestine Babayaro, amongst others. You see, once those guys started migrating into the English Premier League, automatically Nigerian brand also elevated itself around the world. Daniel Amokachi joined Everton in 1994. Celestine Babayaro joined Chelsea in 1996. Subsequently, the likes of Kanu Nwankwo moved to Arsenal. Then the almighty JJ Okocha now moved to Bolton Wanderers in 2002. That was the main determinant that led to the inflow of Nigerian players. So if you looked at any given point in time, the Nigerian national team has always had solid players who are playing in the Premier League. I also want to remind us that there was a ruling that came about in 1995, which was the Bosman ruling. Prior to that, Premier League teams, European teams could only have 3 foreign nationals. So then the clubs would rather opt for Brazilian players and Argentinian players. But with the Bosman ruling that eliminated that limitation, clubs now had the freeway to bring in as many foreigners as they chose to. And that also helped Nigerian footballers. Like today, Fulham, for example, has 3 Nigerian players, even though 2 of them are born and brought up in the UK.
Yes.
Okay.
We have Chukwueze, who has joined them. He's joined Iwobi and Basi.
Yeah.
But in the past, you couldn't see 3 Nigerian players, players of Nigerian descent in the Premier League. So a lot has happened over the years, and I'm optimistic that more players will join the English Premier League from Nigerian descent.
I'm pretty interested. I'm sure a lot of Nigerians are interested in, the fortunes this will bring to Nigeria. Prof took us down memory lane, which Hassan also did. But the relationship between players of Nigerian descent and English soccer actually predates the English Premier League. I was a kid when saw a guy called Ade Coker played for West Ham.
Yeah.
I still remember, I was a kid then, but I watched him. We also had the likes of John Chidioze, who played, I think, for Orient, and Tunji Banjo, who actually came to play for Nigeria. Now, these are mixed fortunes, because we heard that Ade Coker later went on to play for the US soccer team, while we had Chidioze and Banjo played for the Super Eagles. Now, like I said, the question other people want to ask, and perhaps you can help us answer this, Prof, is that how can we get a lot of these players, and then you may accuse the Nigerian authorities of reaping where they didn't sow, but a Nigerian is a Nigerian. If we had Bukayo Saka, Ebere Chieze, and against South Africa last week, we probably would have beaten them 20-0 in Bloemfontein. So, how can we actually benefit from these things? Because you said it's a good thing, but it's not really that good if Nigeria is not benefiting from it.
Absolutely. You're very, very correct. You see, we have to, on the home front, we need to do a lot of work, because every national team has an identity. And an identity cannot be divorced from, the happenings within the context of the country. Okay. So most of these young chaps would love to play for the country, but when they hear a lot of news about the country, things that are not so palatable, they get scared. like issues of insecurity. And I don't want to go into politics. But you see, the country has to do a lot to attract these talents. And again, a lot of foreign-based guys also have to be willing to play for the country. You know, it's a national pride. It's also a pride for them to wear the national colors. And people like our current captain now, he even said that, since he started playing for the national team, his fortunes improved. Even Ademola Lookman, the current African Footballer of the Year, who is English born, of Nigerian heritage, also confessed the same thing. Even Ashley Plumtree, the lady who actually helped Nigeria to win the AFCON, the 10th one, also said so. So, there has to be this passion by these foreign-based people to want to play for Nigeria. And then, of course, we cannot run away from the fact that the NFF has to put their house in order. As much as we don't want to criticize them or, would I say malign them, they have to do their job. Because, playing for your country is not something that you just take for granted. Of course, like my friend there said, the chairman of the association said, these guys are willing to play for us. But the place has to be welcoming for them. It's very important. And beyond that, the administrative aspect of it has to be top-notch. And we must also seek these guys early. You don't allow other FAs to poach them. You must go aggressively, pursue them, convince them, and do that early. Not until they become superstars. You also have to nurture them. So a lot of things have to be done. Administratively, we put our house in order. Then, again, there has to be this philosophy of development of football. We must have a philosophy. We used to have that. Even locally, our league is also suffering. We have a lot of talents who can make the national team. Like my friend over there said, that 1994, Nigeria got up to the 5th, ranking in FIFA. And I will tell you that about 90% of those players, if not 95, were home-based. Stephen Keshi and all of them. So we need to do a lot to attract the interest of these people who are based abroad to play for Nigeria. And again, let this success overseas reflect in our local league. Look at the guys we played in South Africa. Majority of them play at home. Even their coach teased us that we have all these foreign-based players. It amounted to nothing. So what do? Put our own league in order, both administratively, then also finance. Let us pay these guys well, so that some of them want to stay at home.
All right. Let me come back to you. I'm sure you listened to what he has said. And really, football for Nigeria, and I think for the rest of the world, is like a religion on its own. It's become that intense. And Nigerians have been known to rough up, one another just to protect their teams,
Yes.
and the EPL is like a religious night vigil. People have to face. I've heard about people having accidents on the road trying to rush, to meet up again, etc., etc. But this love for the EPL, versus the Nigerian league, and we know how much money that this money brings into of course, the GDP of England, of London, of the EPL games, of the footballers themselves. Can we look at how we can? He talked about homegrown solutions for our homegrown leagues. We demonstrate what really needs to be done here in Nigeria for those footballers and perhaps the many talents that are budding to begin to feel the factor that Nigeria can indeed improve football administration.
Well, Nigeria is still a developing nation, so we cannot compare what's obtainable in the Western world to that of our country. But we can still make a lot of improvements. The biggest challenge facing sports in Nigeria, not just football, is funding. It's the biggest fan base in the country, aside from politics. The next is sports.
Yeah.
But a lot of times people underestimate the quantum of underfunding that is taking place in the sector. So if you look at the budgets for these leagues, for example, the last President's Cup final that took place in Lagos, I think the first prize got about 100 million naira or so, or maybe 200 million. If you quantify that with what the first prize will get in the FA Cup finals in Britain,
Peanuts.
you see that it's just peanuts. So number one, we need to find a way to improve on the funding opportunities for the Premier Leagues. It will take a mixture of both the public sector and the private sector. For example, in Morocco, despite they have a buoyant league, at the beginning of the season, the government of Morocco gives the clubs, depending on your league your status, give you as much as $1 million to kickstart the season. Some get as much as $500,000. But in Nigeria here, everything is left for the private sector, and the private sector are also burdened with their own responsibilities. Then we also need to go back to grassroots football, especially secondary school football. Professor mentioned the likes of them, Stephen Keshi and Austin Eguavon and J.J. Okocha and co. They built their identities at their secondary schools before they were integrated into the national teams. What happens today is that the best talent are in the academies. They never get a chance to establish their identities locally before they find their way to Europe. They get to Europe, some of them succeed, most of them fall by the wayside because they are not fully developed before they leave the country. If you look at the homegrown talents today we have on the Nigerian Super Eagles, none of them had an identity locally before they made it to Europe. That's because they never played secondary school football. Yeah. So we need to invest at that level and also maybe come up with a policy that will restrict the age to which you can go to Europe. Okay. Because there are a lot of young players, 16-year-olds, 15-year-olds, that are wallowing in academies, not even in the top countries in Europe. Maybe you see countries like Azerbaijan. These are countries that top talent, Nigerian talent, shouldn't be found. But you see, because of the desperation of saying, I want to go to Europe, a lot of these guys end up destroying their careers.
Why I asked this question is because the EPL is almost or considered one of the greatest, most visible multinational corporation in the world. And so I say this because when you combine the resources of the EPL club from 2021 to about now, someone says it's close to 14.76 billion pounds. And the question is, for us in Nigeria, do we see business as sports, football as business rather than pleasure? Because that has always been the conversation, that a lot of these countries see football more as a business, invest in it to get returns, and we see it more as pleasure and a tool for patrons.
It's we, the sports practitioners, who owe it to the fans. We have to make the fans see football and sports as a business. As a fan is not concerned with the backroom financial activities that take place. All they're interested in is entertainment.
Trophies too.
So we need to make them we need to make them see it as a business. Once you put together a solid product, people will patronize the product. I mean, let's look back in the 80s and the 90s. Our stadiums were always filled up with Nigerian fans. Fans were paying to get into the stadium. That's because the quality of talent in the local league at that time was at its highest. You could easily walk into the national team if you are playing for a team, a local team. But today it's very difficult. We saw what happened at Chan in Tanzania,
where we
got hammered. You know, I mean, it's shameful to say these were the best players we have in the local league, but that's the reality.
Yes.
Because we're not.
It was a huge exposure. Huge exposure.
Absolutely. Yes. So imagine if we had the likes of Mikel Obi, during their prime, they were playing in the local league. And all of that, people will patronize them. The likes of Amokachi, he was playing for Ranchers Bees. People trooped out to watch Amokachi, Shegun Odegbami, Rashidi Yekini, name them all. These were some of the best players Nigeria have produced. And once upon a time, they plied their trade in the local league.
Perhaps we'll bring Prof into this because it's a very important point I think we're touching on. Can we call it the assembly line of producing players in Nigeria, just like Hassan pointed out. He mentioned a long list of names. What's your take on the need, or what do you think we need to do to get back to getting that assembly line working, where we can start producing players, have a viable league? Of course, we'll probably end up losing them all to the Premier League at the end of the day. But at least let them have an identity here in Nigeria. Let them identify with Nigeria, which is probably where we'll probably get them to also play for Nigeria also. Prof, what do you have to say about that?
Yeah, these are very salient points, and they're very germane. You know, football, sports generally, and football in particular, it's a business. You know, it's also a source of pleasure for people. You discover that Nigerians are happiest when there is maybe the EPL going on. They look forward to the league starting, and also when national team is playing. It's a big passion. People can fulfill their dinner, lunch just to watch Nigerian football. I mean, at the national level. But then, of course, like I said, you cannot separate, the interest now in our local league from the economic crisis, social crisis that's going on. I remember in 1979 when Bendel Insurance was playing Canon Sportif of Yaoundé. I left the boarding house, I sneaked out. Let me report myself now. I sneaked out.
Don't worry, we won't tell anybody.
Okay. Yeah, please don't. Thank you. My mom will kill me. So I sneaked out to Ogbe Stadium to go and watch, Bendel Insurance. And that day, the stadium collapsed. Part of the stadium collapsed. Some people lost their lives, unfortunately, may they rest in peace. But some of us, so were lucky enough to survive because of the capacity. A lot of it was overflowing. People had passion because the economy was good. The social indices were okay. But now, a lot of people are thinking of how they're going to get their next meal. So I mean, and this is also not helping in the local league because if people are not attending games, there can't be income. So these are some of the things, and then we need to really straighten out some of these issues. And then again, talking about school sports, I'm very glad that your guest there at the studios mentioned this because these are grassroots avenues where you can really discover talents. Henry Wosu, played for national team, I think between 16 and 17 years old. He was discovered, during this, Christmas Cup in Lagos. So these
He was
days,
playing for St. Finbar's or something like that. Then,
thank you very much. So so these days, go to schools. There are no complexes. The place overgrown with bushes. Students are even suffering in schools. Partly because the schools are, ASU, what ASU is talking about, revamping universities. So these are some of the. Now, for us to get it right, the basics must be set and put in place, particularly if we want to get the best out of it. Now, the transfer window alone, if you see the billions of pounds and dollars clubs spent, particularly in the EPL, they are the biggest spenders. And that is why it's such a big league, the most expensive in the world, the most watched in the world. And, because they invest in it. I wouldn't agree with I would respectfully disagree with my friend over there about the corporate involvement in sports. They're not doing enough. I mean, if they know the value of sports in Nigeria, they should invest in it because there's a lot of returns. You know what it means for you to have a player. I'm an intermediary. I've not been so lucky because of academics. I've not had time to go into it full time. You know what it means to have one player, just one player, in a year. I mean, a good player. You know what that means? You can even retire because there's a lot of money in it. So there has to be investment.
All right, Prof, let me come in here because I hear you talk about, you're thinking differently from what he said. You talked about more investment. Some of our, participants online here, watching online, Victor Joe says Nigeria should remove politics from football. What do you say to that?
Yes, yeah, that is a great point. We cannot politicize our sports. Now, I remember one of the reasons why we didn't qualify for the 1996 World Cup was because the last game against Angola was taken to Kano. Kano is part of Nigeria, of course. Super Eagles should play all over Nigeria if there are good stadiums there. But the point is this, when you have players, about 95% playing in Europe, then you take a game to Kano at that time, the last game, where we needed just, maybe a win or a draw, a scoreless draw. But then we went there, it was 1-1. Angola went there based on a away goals rule. Ghana, the same thing, last World Cup. They took the game to Abuja, then 1-1. Ghana qualified, politics. Now, Uyo has
sorry,
been
Prof.
our fortress.
How is that political? Taking the games. Are you saying that I don't understand why those games were taken? Was it because of what geographical spread, or what was the reason why those games were actually
No,
taken to those places?
I must be frank. These are my own opinions, not the AIT's opinion. It was political. I will tell you categorically, unequivocally, it was political. Yes, of course, like I said earlier, the fans in Kano, the fans in Abuja deserve or reserve the right to have our national team play in their domain. No problem with that. But you have to look at climate. You have to look at, circumstances. You have to look at, needs at that time. That's what I'm saying. Now, why are we not having enough stadiums in the country? Why is it only with you? It's politics. Because decision making is political. Everything is political. Now, you cannot take politics away from football in Nigeria. And it's killing us. Some persons are even saying quota system. It's not a good thing. If you're going to have, remember 1985, the Golden Eagles. about 8 of the players were from Bender State. It's not because I'm from Bender State, but they won the cup. If everybody's going to come from Kano, let them come from Kano. Get the best from anywhere. Let them represent us. And politicians should not be involved in sports. Nigeria qualifies for a tournament. Politicians will make up over 80% of the officials going. Why? Remove politics from sports. Let those who know sports run sports so that Nigeria can get the benefit of our talents in this country.
All right.
I think you want to weigh in on that?
Well, I've been in the system for a while. The concept that a lot of politics is involved in running football is grossly overstated. I can categorically say that if you are not good enough, you can't play for the Nigerian Super Eagles. Oftentimes, 1 or 2 players get invited. There's a lot of noises being made about them being on the national team because of their cultural identities. But at the end of the day, those players end up proving the fans wrong. I remember the likes of Garba Lawal. When he was invited to the Nigerian national team, there was this belief that the only reason why he was on the national team was because he was from the northern part of the country. At the end of the day, he ended up being probably the most disciplined footballer to have played on the national team.
Absolutely.
And he was a starter under 8 Nigerian Super Eagles coaches. We had the likes of Tijani Babangida amongst others. So the mindset that there's quota system involved in selecting players for the national team is totally wrong.
How about venues? He talked about venues.
Well, on
Stadium
the issue of venue, you play with what is available. I wasn't there at the time when the match was played in Kano, so I don't really know what informed their decision making. But that of Abuja, where we played Ghana, where we played Ghana during the World Cup qualifiers in 2022, Abuja was the right venue. Abuja had been a base for the Super Eagles for a very long time. The only reason why matches were moved to Uyo was because the pitch was not in order. And we felt we needed a venue that will bring all Nigerians together, a venue that can accommodate at least 60,000 Nigerian supporters so that it can be intimidating. And anybody who was at the stadium at that day will know that it wasn't the venue. The venue wasn't the reason why we didn't qualify.
Yeah.
There was a lot of luck involved, you know. Uyo can accommodate only about 30,000. I've been to the Uyo Stadium on several occasions.
All right.
It takes a lot to even fill up the Uyo Stadium compared to Abuja. Whenever the Super Eagles play in Abuja, it's more or less a carnival. Because
All right,
of
thank
Okay,
you.
I think we're just going to have to leave it like that. I didn't know that it was going to be as, action-packed as the discussion turned out. Many thanks to Professor Felix Okokere, a public affairs analyst from the Edo State University, and Hassan Wadab, chairman of Kogi State Football Association. If I let you go quickly, which is your EPL team?
Well, I have a sympathy for Chelsea because they signed on Celestine Babayaro after Atlanta.
Prof, how about you?
Sorry, well, I'm from Ambrose Ali University, not Edo University. Let me clear that for
Okay, sorry.
Chelsea, but
What?
yeah.
All right, looks like we've got the right sort of guests in the studio
we're very
again.
lucky.
Many thanks for both of you for coming on the program. We've gone a little bit past the second hour on Kakaki, the African Voice, this Tuesday. And you know what happens around this time. Kakaki Socials.
Be up next.
In football, in contemporary football, there are no underdogs because every nation seeks to bring up their A game to ensure that they qualify for the World Cup. And this is what we're seeing more